Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy posting here. I've lurked for years, read countless stories of heartbreak, and always thought that'll never happen to me. I mean, why would it? My wife, Sarah, and I have been together for 10 years, married for 7. We have a beautiful home, 2 golden retrievers, and what I thought was a solid relationship. I won't lie, we've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were in a good place. Or at least, I didn't till a few months ago. It started small, tiny cracks that seemed innocent at first. Sarah began staying late at work more often. She's a marketing manager, so deadlines can get hectic, but it felt off. She used to text me updates, little things like, "Ugh, stuck in a meeting," or "can't wait to be home with you." Those messages stopped. Then came the phone. She was glued to it. Before, she'd leave it lying around the house, but now it was practically an extension of her hand. She'd angle the screen away from me, and if I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd lock it faster than a teenager hiding bad grades. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was planning something for our upcoming anniversary, but a nagging feeling settled in my gut, one I couldn't shake. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I trusted her. After all, trust is the foundation of a good marriage, right? If only I'd known then what I know now. Things kept getting stranger. Sarah's late nights at work weren't an occasional thing anymore. They were constant. "We're launching a big campaign," she said. "The team needs me." I wanted to believe her, but something about her tone didn't sit right. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she avoided eye contact, how her voice went up just a little at the end, like she was asking for permission instead of explaining. Then there was her appearance. Sarah's always been gorgeous, but she started putting in extra effort, like runway model effort, for work. New dresses, hours spent curling her hair, expensive perfume I didn't recognize. "I just want to feel good about myself," she said when I asked. Fair enough. Who was I to question her self-care? But it nagged at me. The turning point came on a Saturday. Sarah told me she had to head into the office to fix a client presentation. That wasn't unusual at this point, but what threw me off was how cagey she was when I offered to drive her. "Oh no, don't bother," she said, laughing nervously. "It's out of your way, and I'll only be a couple of hours." The gut feeling I'd been trying to ignore hit me like a freight train. I couldn't keep brushing this off. Something wasn't right, and I needed to know what. I decided to trust my instincts for once. After she left, I waited about 20 minutes and then got in my car. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't sit at home pretending everything was fine. Sarah's office is downtown, but instead of heading there, her car turned off onto a side street. I followed at a distance, heart pounding. She pulled into the parking lot of a little cafe, the kind of place you'd go for a romantic date, not a work meeting. I parked across the street, my hands shaking as I watched her get out. That's when I saw him. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing one of those tight-fitting button-downs that screams, "I spend more time at the gym than at my desk." He greeted her with a hug, a lingering one, and kissed her on the cheek. My stomach dropped. I sat there, frozen, as they went inside. Part of me wanted to burst through the doors and demand answers right then and there. But the other part, the one that kept telling me to stay calm and gather proof, won out. I needed to know the full story before confronting her. I waited for what felt like hours. It was probably 30 minutes before deciding to take action. I walked into the cafe, trying to act casual like I just happened to stop in for a coffee. There they were, sitting at a corner table, leaning in close, her hand on his arm. She was laughing a laugh I hadn't heard in weeks. I couldn't do it. I couldn't face her in that moment. My legs carried me out of the cafe before my brain caught up. I sat in my car, staring at nothing, the weight of what I'd just seen crashing down on me. When she came home later that afternoon, I didn't say a word. I couldn't. All I could think about was her smile, the way she'd looked at him. That night, while she was in the shower, I went through her phone. I didn't even feel guilty. At this point, I felt like I owed it to myself to know the truth. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Texts from a guy named Jake flooded her messages. Some were innocent enough, work-related like she claimed, but others weren't. Flirty banter, late-night exchanges, even a few pictures that made my stomach turn. It was all there in black and white, proof that she was cheating on me. One message, in particular, hit me like a punch to the gut. "Jake, can't stop thinking about last night. You look so sexy in that dress. Sarah, you weren't so bad yourself. Let's just say I'm still feeling it today, winking face. I didn't need a translator to know what that meant. I put her phone back where I found it and sat on the edge of our bed, my mind racing. What the hell was I supposed to do now? The next morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I'd spent the whole night tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to say or how to say it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with Jake or read that damn text in my head. Sarah woke up late, groggy and wrapped in her perfect little cocoon of lies. She padded into the kitchen, her hair messy, looking so normal, so unbothered, that it made my blood boil. I watched her pour herself a cup of coffee, humming like it was just another day. "Who's Jake?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She froze mid-pour. It was so fast I almost laughed, almost. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. "What?" she said, her voice a mix of confusion and panic. "You heard me," I said, crossing my arms. "Who is Jake? And don't you dare tell me he's just a co-worker." Her face flushed red, not the kind of red that comes from embarrassment, but the kind that screams I've been caught. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, turning away to put the coffee pot down. "You're acting crazy. Crazy." That word lit a fire in me. "Don't," I said, my voice rising. "Don't gaslight me. I saw the text, Sarah. I saw you with him yesterday at the cafe. So, once again, who is Jake?" She spun around, her expression shifting from panic to anger. "You went through my phone?" she snapped, ignoring the actual accusation. "That's such an invasion of privacy. How dare you?" "Oh, don't even try that," I said, slamming my hand on the counter. "You're deflecting. Answer the damn question." For a moment, she just stared at me, her jaw tight, her eyes darting around like she was trying to come up with a plausible lie. Finally, she sighed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "Fine," she said. "If you really must know, Jake is a friend. A close friend. We've been working on a project together, and maybe we've gotten a little too comfortable. But it's nothing. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Comfortable?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You call sexting and meeting up at cafes while lying to your husband comfortable? Do you even hear yourself right now?" "I didn't lie," she said defensively. "I said I was working and we just grabbed coffee afterward. It's not a big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Not a big deal? Sarah, you've been sneaking around, hiding your phone, and sending messages like, 'I'm still feeling it today.' You really expect me to believe that's all innocent?" Her face turned white as a sheet. I'd hit a nerve. "You're being so dramatic," she said, her voice quieter now, but still laced with defiance. "It's not like I slept with him." The sheer audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. "And I'm just supposed to take your word for it? Because you've been so honest up until now." She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a long time, staring at my untouched coffee. Part of me hoped she'd come back, apologize, and tell me the truth, but she didn't. She stayed locked in the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The rest of the day was a tense, unbearable standoff. Sarah stayed in the bedroom for hours, and when she finally emerged, she acted like nothing had happened. She breezed past me to grab her purse, muttering, "I'm going out for a bit." "Where?" I asked, standing up from the couch. She rolled her eyes. "Do I need to give you an itinerary now?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Because you've been lying to me. So, yeah, I think I deserve to know where you're going." She glared at me, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I'm going to Katie's," she snapped. "You remember my friend Katie, don't you? Or are you going to accuse me of sleeping with her too?" Her sarcasm stung, but I wasn't buying it. Katie lived 2 towns over, and Sarah hadn't mentioned her in months. Still, I let her go. Arguing with her felt pointless, and I needed time to think. But my gut wouldn't let it go. After she left, I called Katie. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "This is a bit random, but is Sarah with you?" Katie paused. "Oh no," she said. "I haven't seen Sarah in ages." "Why?" My heart sank. "Oh, no reason. Just thought she mentioned visiting you." "Nope," Katie said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, Elite. All good. Thanks. I hung up, my hands trembling. She'd lied again. I didn't know where she was or what she was doing, but I knew it wasn't good. Hours later, Sarah came home smelling like wine and looking disheveled. Had a good time at Katie's? I asked, not even trying to hide the sarcasm. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I called Katie, I said. And guess what? She hasn't seen you in months. Her face froze for a split second before she recovered. I can't believe you're spying on me, she said, shaking her head. This is insane. Spying on you? I said, my voice rising. You're the one sneaking around and lying to my face. Don't turn this around on me, Sarah. She let out a bitter laugh. Fine, she said. I wasn't at Katie's. I went for a drive to clear my head. Happy now? A drive? I repeated, disbelief dripping from my voice. For 5 hours? Come on, Sarah. Do you even hear yourself? I needed space, okay? She snapped. You've been suffocating me with all your accusations. I just needed to get away. I didn't buy it for a second, but I was too drained to keep arguing. Whatever, I said, turning away. I'm done playing this game with you. She didn't respond. Instead, she stormed off to the bedroom again, slamming the door like a teenager. That night, I slept on the couch. Or at least I tried to. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. I kept replaying our conversations, trying to figure out where things had gone so horribly wrong. Was this my fault? Had I missed the signs? Or was Sarah just not who I thought she was? The next morning, I woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. She must have forgotten to take it with her when she went out to run errands. I hesitated, staring at the screen. Part of me didn't want to see any more. But the other part, the part that needed answers, went out. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. The first thing I saw was a message from Jake. Jake, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. My hands shook as I scrolled up. The texts were explicit, leaving no room for doubt about what had been going on. They'd met up at a hotel the night before, while she was supposedly clearing her head. I felt sick. This wasn't just emotional cheating or flirting anymore. This was a full-blown affair. When Sarah came home later that day, I was ready. I didn't bother pretending like everything was fine when Sarah walked through the door. I was done. The silence in the house was thick with tension, and I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. She didn't even look at me as she dropped her purse on the table, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing. I stood in the kitchen, holding her phone in my hand. When she finally glanced up and saw the look on my face, her eyes widened, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of guilt cross her features. What's wrong? She asked, her voice too casual, like she was trying to keep the mood light. I didn't say a word. I just dropped the phone onto the counter, and the text from Jake that I'd found earlier was still visible. Her face drained of color. What is this? She asked, her voice shaking now. You tell me, I said, my throat tight. I know about you and Jake. I know what you've been doing behind my back. All the lies, the late nights, the hotel rooms. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth like she was trying to hold back the words. I didn't. Didn't what? I cut her off. Didn't mean to betray me. Didn't intend to destroy everything we had. My voice cracked as I spoke, the anger and hurt flooding me all at once. How long has this been going on, Sarah? She faltered, her eyes darting around the room like she was trying to find an escape. It was just a mistake. A dumb mistake. It didn't mean anything. A mistake? I repeated, my laugh bitter and harsh. A dumb mistake? So, sleeping with him, texting him, lying to me for months, that was just a mistake. Her eyes welled up with tears, and I could see her trying to find a way out of this, to convince me that everything she'd done didn't matter, that it wasn't as bad as I was making it seem. But I wasn't buying it anymore. No, I said, my voice growing cold. This is what you've been doing behind my back, and you're telling me it's just a mistake. I'm done with this, Sarah. I can't keep living this lie. She reached for me, her hand trembling as she stepped forward. Please don't say that, she whispered. I'm sorry. Okay. I've been stressed, and Jake, he just made me feel good about myself. I never meant for it to go this far. You're everything to me, you know that. I love you. It was like a slap in the face. I couldn't even look at her. Love me? I said, my voice barely audible. You love me, but you've been sleeping with another man behind my back? You think I'm stupid? I'm done, Sarah. I can't keep doing this. I won't. Her face crumpled in disbelief. Please, please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I'll cut him out of my life. Just don't leave me. I shook my head, my throat tight. It's too late for that. I can't trust you anymore. You broke that trust the moment you decided to cheat on me. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. I left the house, the sound of the doors slamming behind me still echoing in my ears. I had no destination in mind, no clear idea of what to do next. I just needed to get away from her, away from everything. I drove aimlessly for hours, the road stretching out before me like some kind of endless void, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. But even with the car windows rolled down, the cold air rushing through, I couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. The betrayal was like a stone lodged in my chest, heavy and unrelenting. The anger was still there, boiling beneath the surface, but there was something else, too, a deep, aching sadness. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Sarah and I had shared a life together, our hopes, our dreams, our future. And now that was gone. She had shattered it all, and I was left standing in the ruins of something I'd thought was unbreakable. Around midnight, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and parked the car. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to be around people, to feel like I wasn't completely alone in the world. The diner was mostly empty, save for a couple of truck drivers in the corner booth, their hushed conversations blending into the hum of the neon lights. I slid into a booth by the window, not bothering to look at the menu. I just needed the distraction of something, anything. The waitress came over, a tired-looking woman in her 50s. She gave me a sympathetic smile, probably because I looked like I'd just been through hell and back. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yeah, black," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded and walked off, and I stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker. The familiar ache settled back into my chest. I tried to be everything for Sarah. I'd been a good husband, always there when she needed me, supporting her when things were tough. And this is how she repaid me. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the screen, the glow of it harsh against the darkness of the diner. I thought about texting her, calling her, but what would I even say? I already knew the truth. There was no going back from this. A few minutes later, the waitress came back with my coffee, setting it down in front of me. I smiled weakly in thanks, and she left me to my thoughts. But I wasn't alone in my head. I kept replaying everything, the signs, the lies, the excuses. And each time, the weight of it got heavier, harder to ignore. I took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness almost matching the taste in my mouth. I thought about all the things I should have seen sooner, the red flags I'd missed because I wanted so desperately to believe that things were fine. And then it hit me. I had spent years fighting for this relationship, trying to make it work. But Sarah had already checked out. She'd been gone long before I found out what she'd been doing. A surge of clarity washed over me, and for the first time in days, I felt a small sense of peace. I wasn't going to spend another minute letting her define who I was or what my life was supposed to be. This was it. I had to move on. The drive back to the house felt different. There was no anger anymore, no bitterness, just a quiet resolution. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't even hesitate. I went straight inside, walking past Sarah's empty shoes by the door. She was still in the bedroom, probably trying to come up with more lies, more excuses. But I wasn't interested in hearing them. I didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to beg her to love me or fix this. I was done. I walked straight to the closet and started packing my things. I took what I needed, my clothes, a few personal items, and threw them into a bag. As I moved around the room, the silence of the house was suffocating. It felt like a tomb. I heard Sarah's footsteps behind me. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and desperation. "I'm leaving," I said flatly, not looking at her. "I'm done." Her breath caught, and she tried to reach for me. "Please don't do this. We can work through this. I'm so sorry. You don't have to leave." I paused, my hand resting on the door handle. I could feel her behind me, but it didn't matter anymore. She didn't deserve an explanation. She didn't deserve another chance. No, I said, my voice thick with finality. I don't think you even know what sorry means. You don't get to hurt me like this and then expect me to fix it. I'm done. Without waiting for her response, I left. I didn't even look back. It's been a week since I left. A week since everything came crashing down, since I packed up my things and walked out of the house like it was nothing. And in some ways, it felt like nothing, like it wasn't even real. But in other ways, it's been the hardest week of my life. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, one that I'd scouted out weeks before, just in case. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't have to share it with anyone. The silence here is overwhelming, and sometimes it feels like the walls are closing in on me. But then again, that's better than the suffocating feeling of being in a house with Sarah. The first few days were rough. I spent most of the time staring at the walls, trying to wrap my mind around the fact that everything I'd known was gone. I kept thinking back to the good times, the laughs, the moments that made me feel like I was actually seen, like I mattered. But those moments felt so far away now. They were overshadowed by the lies, the betrayal, the realization that she had been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long. The worst part was the loneliness. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been wrapped up in her. I didn't know who I was outside of being Sarah's husband. It was like the foundation of my identity had been ripped out from under me. And even though I was angry, even though I knew deep down this was the right decision, it didn't stop the hurt from creeping in. I stayed away from social media for the first few days. The thought of seeing her posting about her perfect life, while I was picking up the pieces of mine, made me sick to my stomach. But eventually, curiosity got the best of me. I logged into Facebook, figuring I could at least check in on friends, but of course, Sarah's page was right there in my feed. It was painful to look at, seeing her happy, laughing with friends, looking like the woman I thought I knew. There were pictures of her and Jake too, ones that I'd never seen. She'd hidden them from me, of course. But there they were, out in the open now. I clicked through the photos, my heart pounding in my chest, as if the evidence could somehow hurt me even more than it already had. It was so easy to fall into the trap of wondering why. Why had she done this to me? Why hadn't I seen it coming? But I didn't want to waste any more energy on that. I couldn't. The truth was, Sarah had made her choice. And it wasn't me. I spent the next few days setting up the apartment, getting into a routine that didn't involve her, even if it felt like I was going through the motions. I went to work, met up with a few friends, and did everything I could to distract myself from the reality of it all. But sometimes, when I was lying in bed, I couldn't help but think of her. The way she used to look at me, the way she'd tell me she loved me before she'd fall asleep. I missed her. I missed the woman I thought she was, the one I had married. But that woman didn't exist anymore. A few days ago, I got a text from Sarah. I almost didn't read it, but of course I did. Sarah, I miss you. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? I know I messed up, but I need to see you. Please, let's fix this. I stared at the message for what felt like forever. The anger and hurt flared up inside me again. I thought about responding, telling her how much she had destroyed me, how much I'd given up to be with her, how easily she had thrown it all away. But then I stopped myself. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to let her back in just because I was hurting, just because I missed the idea of her. I didn't want to fall for the same manipulation all over again. So I didn't respond, and it felt like the right choice. But it didn't stop the ache from gnawing at me. The days blurred together. At first, I thought it would get easier, that the pain of everything would fade with time. But it didn't. If anything, it just seemed to dig in deeper. The nights were the hardest, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the silence press down on me. I couldn't escape it, couldn't distract myself enough to outrun it. I stayed busy. I had to. I had to prove to myself that I was okay, that I could handle this. So, I threw myself into work. I worked long hours, I kept up with friends, I even signed up for a gym membership, hoping the endorphins would do something for my mental state. But no matter how much I filled my days, it didn't take away the feeling of emptiness that gnawed at me every second I wasn't distracted. I wasn't angry anymore, not the way I was when I first left. But the sadness? That remained, and it was heavier than I ever expected it to be. At the end of the second week, I got a call from my sister, Lisa. She knew what had happened, of course. I told her everything when I left. We'd always been close, so it wasn't a huge surprise when she called, but this time her voice had a different tone, concerned, almost pleading. "I think you need to talk to her," Lisa said, after I explained how I was feeling. "You've been avoiding it for a while now. She's been texting you, calling you, and I know you don't want to hear this, but I think if you don't talk to her, you'll regret it." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to go back to Sarah. I didn't want to be caught in the web of her lies again. But Lisa was right about one thing. I had been avoiding her. Every time I looked at my phone and saw her name, I hesitated. I hadn't been brave enough to even hear her out. I just shut her out completely. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to be someone who let their emotions get in the way of what was best for me. But the idea of closure, of hearing her side of things, of understanding what had happened, lingered in the back of my mind. So, I called Sarah. It took me a few attempts to dial the number, my fingers shaking as I hovered over the screen. But eventually I hit call. When she picked up, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you," I said. "In person. Can you meet me?" "Yeah," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "I'll be there." We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown the next morning. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting the wreck that I found when I saw her. Sarah was sitting at a table by the window when I walked in. She looked so different, so small. The woman who once had so much confidence, so much life, seemed diminished. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked up when I approached, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I broke the silence. "I thought you were okay," I said, my voice flat, not wanting to give away how much it hurt to see her like this. "I thought you had everything figured out." She flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted them. This wasn't about her. This was about me. "I didn't," she whispered. "I haven't figured anything out. I've messed everything up. She stopped, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know where to start." Her apology felt hollow, but I stayed quiet. I wanted to hear what she had to say, even if I didn't believe it. "I know I hurt you," she continued, her voice trembling. "And I can't take that back. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I was so selfish. But I was. And I ruined everything. I ruined us." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who was vulnerable, who didn't have all the answers. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not yet. "You betrayed me, Sarah," I said softly, my voice steady despite the wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "You didn't just cheat on me. You lied. You hid things from me. You made me believe everything was okay when it wasn't. And now I don't know who you are anymore." She looked at me, her face crumpling in anguish. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. But I love you. I do. And I'll do anything to make it right." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to so badly. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. Not after everything that had happened. "I don't know if that's enough," I said quietly, standing up from the table. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the distance between us feeling like miles. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't go back." I didn't wait for her response. I just walked out of the cafe, leaving everything behind. After meeting with Sarah, I thought things might get easier. I thought maybe the pain would fade. Maybe the emptiness would feel less suffocating with time. But it didn't. If anything, it felt like a new layer of hurt had settled in. I was angry at myself. Angry for even considering going back, for even entertaining the idea that things could somehow go back to what they were. Deep down, I knew I couldn't erase what she'd done, no matter how many times she apologized or how broken she seemed. That wasn't love. That was desperation on her part, and I was no longer willing to be the safety net she relied on when things got hard. The days that followed were difficult. It was hard to ignore the fact that my entire life had been upended. I missed her. I missed the life we'd built together, even though I knew it was a lie. I missed the comfort of her presence, the way we'd spent so many years together, like nothing could ever tear us apart. But now, I was just a person in a stranger's life. We didn't fit anymore. I didn't reach out to her after that day. I didn't respond to her texts, her calls, her endless apologies. I couldn't. I had to focus on myself, on healing. If I let her back in, I'd only end up hurting more. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself questioning everything. I kept wondering if I had done the right thing by leaving, by cutting her out of my life. Maybe I was being too hard on her. Maybe she really did love me. But then I'd remember the way she looked at me when I confronted her, the lies she'd told, the way she casually destroyed everything we had for the thrill of something new. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the realization that she never really saw me as her partner, her equal. I was just an accessory to her life, someone she'd use until something better came along. It was painful to accept that, but I had to. As much as I hated being alone, as much as I hated the idea of starting over, I knew this was the only way forward. I needed to rebuild myself, rediscover who I was without her. It was a process, an exhausting, painful one, but every day I spent without her, every day I kept moving forward, I felt a little stronger. Work helped. It was a welcome distraction, something to focus on other than the constant gnawing feeling in my chest. I buried myself in projects, worked late hours, and made the effort to be social, even when I didn't feel like it. Friends reached out, offering support, but I didn't have the energy to pretend I was okay. I just told them the truth. I was broken, but I was going to get through it. One day, I ran into an old friend, Mark. He was a guy I'd known for years, but we'd lost touch over the past few months. I'd always admired his ability to move on from things without getting bogged down in the mess of emotions. So when he asked me how I was holding up, I just spilled it all. The anger, the sadness, the confusion. "It's okay to hurt, man," he said, leaning back against the bar as we shared a drink. "But you can't keep holding on to this. You gotta let it go. You can't let someone else's mistakes define you. You gotta move on. You deserve better." It was the first time I heard someone say that to me, and for some reason, hearing those words felt like a revelation. Maybe I didn't have to let this experience ruin me. Maybe it was okay to hurt, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had to learn to let go, to move forward, to forgive, not Sarah, but myself. It was easier said than done, but it was the beginning of a shift. Slowly, the pain started to feel a little less intense. I started to let go of the anger and the bitterness that had clouded my thoughts for so long. I wasn't completely healed, but I was healing. One evening, as I was sitting in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker outside my window, I realized something. I was okay. I wasn't happy, not yet, but I was surviving. I had my own life, my own space, and I didn't have to live in the shadow of someone else's mistakes anymore. And that was enough for now. I had learned a lot through this experience. I had learned that people don't always stay, that love isn't guaranteed, and neither is trust. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. I wasn't defined by the mistakes of others, and I wasn't defined by this chapter in my life. I was still figuring it out, still finding my way. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. It had been about a month since that day at the cafe with Sarah, and while I was starting to piece my life back together, I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. I had finally gotten a rhythm, an uneasy calm. I was still single, still healing, and still trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But life, it seemed, wasn't done throwing curveballs at me. I was sitting in my apartment one evening, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when an unexpected message popped up. It was from Jake. I almost didn't open it, but my curiosity got the best of me. I had no idea why he was contacting me, especially after everything that had gone down. My mind raced with all the possible things he might want to say. Was he apologizing for what happened? Was he trying to justify his actions? Or was he just another person trying to get under my skin? I opened the message, heart pounding. "Jake, we need to talk." My stomach churned. The nerve of this guy. I didn't know what he wanted, but I was sure it wasn't anything good. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block his number and move on with my life. But another part of me, an angry, wounded part of me, wanted answers. I wanted him to face what he had done. I wanted him to see the destruction he and Sarah had caused. I needed closure, and for better or worse, I figured this might be a way to get it. I decided to meet him, though I wasn't sure what I was hoping to achieve. I texted him back. "Me, what about? Jake, I know this is hard to hear, but I need you to understand something. Please, just meet me. I agreed, reluctantly, to meet him at a coffee shop the next day. Part of me dreaded it. Part of me wanted to shout, to throw all my pain in his face, and ask him how he could have done what he did. But I didn't. I needed to be calm, needed to be measured. This wasn't about vengeance, no matter how much I wanted it to be. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop a little early, sitting in a corner booth where I could keep my distance. When Jake walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked different, haggard, worn out like someone who had been through hell and back. The usual cocky attitude was gone. He seemed smaller somehow, less sure of himself. He spotted me immediately and made his way over. He sat down across from me, running a hand through his disheveled hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I know you're probably pissed," he said, voice hoarse, almost like he was trying to get the words out but was struggling. "And you should be. But I need you to hear me out." I didn't speak. I just nodded, staring at him, waiting for him to explain himself. The anger simmered under my skin, but I kept it in check. "Sarah, she's not the person you think she is," he started, looking down at his coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. "She's been lying to both of us, man. She's been playing us. She used me, just like she used you." I didn't know what was going on at first, but it didn't take long for me to see the truth. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Jake was telling me that Sarah had been lying to him too, that she had been using him the same way she had used me. For a moment, I just sat there processing his words. It felt like a punch in the gut. "I know what you're thinking," Jake continued, looking up at me, "that I'm just trying to cover my ass, that I'm just some asshole who messed around with your wife and is now looking for a way to make it okay. But that's not it. I never meant to hurt you, man. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But Sarah, she's messed up. She's been playing this game for years." I couldn't help it. The rage boiled up inside of me. I leaned forward, fists clenched on the table. "Are you seriously telling me that you didn't know what you were doing? That you didn't know you were messing around with my wife?" My voice was low, but the anger in it was undeniable. Jake's face crumpled, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I'm not proud of it, man. I'm really not. But she manipulated me too. She had me believing that she was stuck in a bad marriage, that you didn't care about her. She fed me a bunch of lies, and I bought it. I know that doesn't make it right. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I wanted you to know the truth. I didn't just do this to hurt you. I did it because she led me to believe it was what she wanted. And maybe she did, at first, but I don't think she does anymore." The words hit me like a freight train, but I didn't know how to process them. Part of me wanted to tear into Jake, to scream at him for everything he had done. But the other part of me, the more rational side, understood what he was saying. Sarah had lied to him, just like she had lied to me. She had used us both. She had manipulated us, played us off each other. And somehow in the process, I had been the one who ended up losing everything. "I'm not here to make excuses," Jake said quietly, breaking the silence. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. And I'm sorry for hurting you." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I didn't know what to say to him. There was a part of me that wanted to believe him, but another part of me that didn't know if I could ever trust anyone again, especially someone like him. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "But it doesn't change anything. You still did what you did. And Sarah, she still did what she did." Jake nodded, acknowledging the truth in my words. "I know. And I'm sorry." I stood up, pulling my jacket tighter around me. "I think this conversation is over." He didn't argue. He just sat there, looking defeated, as I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. As I walked down the street, I felt a strange sense of relief. I didn't get the closure I thought I would, but I did get some clarity. Jake's words hadn't erased the betrayal, but they gave me a new perspective. Sarah wasn't the only one at fault here. It wasn't just her doing this to me. She had manipulated both of us. She was the one who had to live with that. And I could finally walk away, knowing that I wasn't the one who had been in the wrong. It felt like a weight had been lifted after talking to Jake, but it didn't last long. The sense of closure I had expected from our conversation faded as soon as I was alone again. The pain of everything that had happened hit me all over again. But this time it was different. I wasn't just angry at Sarah anymore. I wasn't even angry at Jake. I was angry at the whole situation, at how everything had crumbled apart. After the coffee shop meeting, I didn't hear from Jake again. He didn't text me, didn't try to reach out. For all the apologies he had offered, he clearly knew there was nothing left for him to say. And, as much as I hated to admit it, I was kind of glad for that. I didn't want any more part of him or Sarah's web of lies. But then came the hardest part, accepting that I had to let go of the idea of what my life had been. The life I had planned, the future I had built with Sarah, was now a distant memory. It was a dream that had crumbled, leaving only the shattered pieces behind. I still had moments of weakness, of course. There were nights when I'd sit on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not really watching, just thinking about what had gone wrong. I'd look at the pictures on the wall, the ones from our trips, our anniversaries, the happy moments, and wonder if they were real at all, or if they were just another lie. And that was the hardest part. I couldn't trust my own memories anymore. The weeks after my meeting with Jake were a blur. I kept myself busy, working long hours, taking on new projects, anything to avoid sitting with my thoughts. I spent more time with friends, had dinner dates, tried to put myself back out there. But it felt like everyone could see the cracks in me, even when I tried to smile and pretend things were fine. Then, about a month later, Sarah contacted me again. This time, it wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a text. It was a letter. I had almost forgotten about her attempts to reach me. Honestly, I had put everything out of my mind, convinced myself that whatever she had to say didn't matter. But when I saw her handwriting on the envelope, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just leave it. I opened the letter carefully, sitting down at my kitchen table. The handwriting was shaky, as if she had written it in a hurry. It was a far cry from the confident, put-together woman I had once known. I don't know what to say, except that I am so sorry. For everything. For what I did to you. For the lies. For everything. I wish I could take it all back, but I know I can't. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that I regret it every day. I love you, and I'm sorry for everything. You were my heart, my life, and I ruined it. Please believe me, I never meant for it to end like this. There was more, but I didn't need to read it. The words felt empty now, meaningless. They were just words on paper, words that couldn't erase the hurt she'd caused. For a moment, I just stared at the letter. The anger that had been building inside me finally found a release. I crumpled the paper in my hand, feeling the weight of it as I crushed the words she had written. The finality of it all settled over me. She had moved on. She was sorry, yes, but she was also the woman who had betrayed me, the woman who had broken everything we had. I wasn't going to let her have any more power over me. I had learned from Jake, from my own experiences, that it was up to me now. I was the one who got to decide how this story ended. And the story didn't end with me crawling back to her. It ended with me finally letting go. It ended with me accepting the fact that no matter how much I had loved her, no matter how much I had invested in our marriage, she wasn't the person I thought she was. It ended with me moving on. A week after reading the letter, I sat down and wrote my own response. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. Writing it was for me, not for her. It was a way to release the last of my anger, the last of my hurt. I let her go, not with the hope that one day we'd reconcile, but with the realization that she had never really been mine to begin with. The person I had loved had been a shadow, a version of her that was never fully real. I kept the letter in a drawer, tucked away and forgotten. I didn't need it anymore. A few weeks later, I met someone new. Her name was Emily. She was kind and funny, and while things with her were still new and uncertain, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She didn't try to fill the hole left by Sarah. She wasn't someone who could replace the past. She was just someone I could see building something with. And that was enough. It's strange how life works. You go from feeling completely shattered, like you'll never be whole again, to slowly finding your way back. It's not a sudden thing. It's not a dramatic moment where everything falls into place. It's a series of small steps, a gradual process of healing that you don't even realize is happening until one day you look up and realize you're not drowning in pain anymore. Emily wasn't a quick fix, and I wasn't looking for one. In fact, when we met, I wasn't even sure I was ready for anything serious. I didn't want to use her to fill the void that Sarah had left behind, but there was something about her that made me want to try again. Emily was different. She had her own life, her own stories, her own baggage. She didn't carry the weight of my past, and she didn't expect me to carry hers. Our first date was awkward. We both came into it with reservations, both of us trying to figure out what we were even doing there. We talked about the usual things, work, music, hobbies, but there was something unspoken between us, something hesitant. I wasn't sure if she was even interested, and she probably thought I was still carrying too much of my past. But as the night went on, something shifted. We started talking more freely, the awkwardness faded, and by the time dessert came, I realized I was actually enjoying myself. We didn't dive straight into anything serious. We took it slow, and for the first time in a long while, I was okay with that. Emily didn't push me, didn't ask me about my past, or any of the things I wasn't ready to share. She let me go at my own pace, and in return, I let myself be open to her in a way I hadn't been with anyone since Sarah. It wasn't perfect. There were moments where I still thought about Sarah, where I wondered if I was making a mistake, if I was rushing into something too soon. But Emily was patient with me. She let me process things in my own time. She didn't try to fix me. She just let me be who I was, damaged, confused, and still healing. A few months passed, and as we spent more time together, I began to realize something. I was beginning to trust again. Not in the same way I had trusted Sarah, but in a way that felt real and honest. Emily was kind, compassionate, and she never once gave me a reason to doubt her. She never lied to me, never tried to manipulate me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. But there was still a part of me that wasn't ready to let go of the past entirely. I hadn't spoken to Sarah since the day I read her letter. I had no idea where she was or what she was doing, and to be honest, I didn't care. But every now and then, a memory would pop into my head. The way she laughed, the way she used to touch my arm when we were sitting together. The good times, the times when I thought everything was perfect, and I couldn't help but wonder what could have been if she hadn't made the choices she did. Still, I couldn't let that hold me back. I had made the choice to move on, to leave the past behind, and I had to stick to it. It was easy to get caught up in nostalgia, to wonder if there was something I had missed. But I knew better now. I knew that the past was gone, and it wasn't coming back. The hardest part wasn't letting go of Sarah. It was letting go of the version of myself that had existed when I was with her. The person who believed in love without conditions, who believed in forever. The person who thought that no matter what happened, we would always be there for each other. That person didn't exist anymore, and I had to accept that. One evening, Emily and I were sitting on the couch in her apartment, watching a movie. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and things were starting to feel more comfortable between us. It wasn't love, not yet, but it felt real. I looked over at her, at the way her hair fell around her face as she laughed at a silly joke in the movie. She was beautiful, and she was kind, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe I could have this again. "Hey," I said, nudging her with my elbow. "Can I ask you something?" She paused the movie, turning to face me with a smile. "Sure. What's up?" I took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. This wasn't something I'd talked about with anyone in a long time. But I needed to ask, "Do you believe in second chances?" I asked, my voice steady but unsure. Emily tilted her head, her expression softening. "I do," she said, "but only if the person is willing to really try. If they're not still living in the past, you know?" I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I wasn't the same person I was when I was with Sarah. I wasn't the broken man who couldn't see beyond the betrayal. I was someone who had learned from my mistakes, who had come out the other side stronger. I wasn't sure where Emily and I would go from here, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to find out. "I'm still figuring things out," I said slowly. "But I'm not living in the past anymore. I'm here, and I'm trying." Emily smiled, her eyes warm. "I know you are." For the first time in a long time, I believed her. A few months had passed since that conversation with Emily on the couch. We were growing closer, and things were starting to feel less like an attempt to move on from my past and more like a genuine new chapter. Still, I had my reservations. My past with Sarah loomed over me like a shadow I couldn't quite shake, and I wasn't sure how much of that would follow me into this relationship. But Emily had a way of making me feel like it was okay to be vulnerable, to admit that I still had a long way to go, but that I was willing to try. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I'd catch myself pulling away, when something Sarah had done would pop into my mind, and I'd get lost in those memories again. But Emily was patient. She understood that I wasn't broken, but I was still healing, and that was okay. She didn't rush me, and she didn't try to fix me. She just let me be who I was. One Saturday, we went on a weekend trip to a small town about 2 hours away. It wasn't anything fancy, just a chance to get away from the city and spend time together. Emily had suggested it, and I was reluctant at first. I didn't want to go somewhere that might trigger old memories, but I trusted her, and I knew it was time to stop letting my past control my decisions. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast, nestled in a quiet, scenic part of the town. The air was crisp. The trees around the inn were filled with the golden and red leaves of fall, and the small town had this peaceful, almost magical feel to it. I could feel myself relaxing as soon as we got there, the tension in my shoulders loosening with every step. The first day, we explored the town, walking down narrow streets lined with charming little shops and cafes. Emily was a perfect companion for this kind of thing. Fun, easygoing, and up for anything. We stopped for coffee at a tiny cafe, laughing over small things, enjoying the simplicity of being together without the pressures of our normal lives. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't carrying the weight of my past. I wasn't wondering if Sarah would come back, or if I was still broken. I was just living in the moment. The next day, Emily suggested a hike through the nearby woods. We made our way along a well-worn path, surrounded by towering trees and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. As we walked, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't done in a long time. It wasn't anything huge, just small revelations about myself, about how I still sometimes had nightmares of that night I found out about the affair, or how I was afraid of getting too close to someone again because I didn't want to risk getting hurt. I guess I've been afraid of trusting people. I admitted, my voice quieter than usual. Afraid of putting myself out there again? I didn't realize how much I was holding back until now. Emily looked over at me, her expression soft. I understand. I think everyone's afraid of getting hurt, even if they don't admit it. But sometimes, you just have to take a leap, you know? I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. Trust wasn't something that just appeared. It had to be earned, and it had to be given willingly. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to take that leap. We reached a clearing with a small lake at the center, its surface smooth and reflective like a mirror. The scenery was breathtaking, the colors of the trees reflecting off the water, creating a tranquil, peaceful atmosphere. We sat down by the water, just soaking in the beauty of it all. "You're not the same person you were when we first met," Emily said, breaking the silence. Her voice was gentle, but I could hear the sincerity in it. "You've come so far, and I'm really proud of you." I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was what I needed. She had seen me at my worst, and she was still here. She saw the parts of me that I tried to hide, and she accepted them. And that in itself was enough to make me believe that maybe there was still hope for me. "I'm trying," I said quietly. "And I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to see where this goes. With you." Her eyes softened, and she smiled at me, genuinely, warmly. "I want that too." It wasn't a grand declaration of love, and it didn't need to be. It was a moment of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of how far we had both come. And it felt right. As we sat there, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, I realized something. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was growing, and that was the most important thing. When we got back to the bed and breakfast that evening, I felt lighter. We spent the night talking and laughing, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. I felt like I was moving forward, and it was a good feeling. The next morning, as we packed up to head back to the city, I had a realization. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of getting hurt, of loving again, of trusting someone else with my heart. Emily had shown me that not everyone was like Sarah. Not everyone would betray me. And even though I wasn't sure what the future held, I was ready to face it with her by my side. As we drove back, hand in hand, I knew that I had made the right choice. I wasn't the same person I had been when I met Sarah, and I wasn't the same person I had been when I met Emily. I had learned from my mistakes, and I had learned from the pain, and that made all the difference. The months following our weekend getaway felt like a slow but steady climb. Things with Emily were getting more serious, and I felt like I was finally in a place where I could look ahead and not constantly worry about what had happened in the past. But the old scars were still there, lingering just beneath the surface. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have moments where I'd get lost in memories of Sarah, where the pain of her betrayal would flood back in. But Emily was there, and with her, I felt like I was starting to build something real again. However, even as I allowed myself to trust Emily more, there was still this unresolved chapter in my life. The chapter with Sarah. I hadn't heard from her in months. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need closure from her either. But there was one thing I hadn't done that I needed to do. I needed to let her know, once and for all, that I was done. I hadn't given up on Sarah's apology or reconciliation. I had let go of the idea that she would ever make it right. I had made peace with the fact that the person I thought she was, the person I had loved, no longer existed. But there was a part of me that needed to speak my truth. I needed to let her know that I had taken my power back, that I wasn't going to let her or her actions define me anymore. One morning, as I sat at my desk sipping coffee, I stared at my phone for a long time. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. So, after a few deep breaths, I typed out a message. It wasn't long, but it was the closure I needed. I didn't expect a reply, and honestly, I didn't want one. Sarah, I've spent a lot of time trying to make sense of everything that happened between us. I've learned a lot, but the most important thing I've learned is that I'm done. I'm done trying to fix things that can't be fixed. I'm done hoping for apologies that will never come. I'm moving on, and I'm taking back control of my life. I hope you find what you're looking for, but I'm not part of that anymore. Take care. I hit send, and then I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself that had been lost during our marriage. I didn't need to keep carrying her weight on my shoulders. I didn't need her permission to move on. A few days passed, and I heard nothing. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. And that was exactly what I needed. It was the closure I'd been looking for all along. Meanwhile, life with Emily continued to unfold in its own quiet, beautiful way. We kept things low pressure, but steady. I wasn't thinking about marriage or any of that. I was simply enjoying the moments we had together. I learned to appreciate the little things. Her laugh when something surprised her, the way she would play with her hair when she was deep in thought, the comfort of her presence after a long day. But as much as I had been focusing on myself and my relationship with Emily, I couldn't ignore the part of me that still feared repeating my past mistakes. I wasn't a fool. I knew that relationships took work. Trust had to be earned every day. But part of me was afraid. I was afraid that my scars from Sarah's betrayal would come up again, that they would affect everything I'd built with Emily. One night, as we were lying in bed, her head resting on my chest, I let the words spill out. Emily. I started, unsure of how to put my thoughts into words. I know I've been holding back in some ways. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to drag any of my old baggage into this relationship. She raised her head and looked at me, her eyes soft with understanding. I know you're still healing, and I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice steady but gentle. You don't have to be perfect. I just want you to be honest with me. I swallowed, feeling the weight of her words settle deep inside me. I'm not perfect, I admitted. I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm trying. I want to give you everything I have. But sometimes, I'm scared that I'll mess it up, that the past will come back and ruin things. Emily smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. You're not going to mess it up, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. The past is the past. We're building something new here, and I'm here with you, no matter what. I felt a lump in my throat, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to fully feel everything I had been suppressing. The fear, the doubt, the hope, all of it flooded over me. But in Emily's arms, I finally allowed myself to surrender to the vulnerability. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, we lay in silence for a while, the only sound being the soft rhythm of our breathing. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, It's strange how much we can change, how far we can come when we allow ourselves to. In the years since Sarah, I never imagined I'd feel this way again. I never thought I'd trust someone so fully, so completely. But Emily showed me that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a series of steps, some bigger than others, some harder to take, but each one bringing me closer to who I was meant to be. I don't think I realized how much of myself I had lost until I started finding it again. When I was with Sarah, I was convinced that love was everything, that it could conquer all. But I learned the hard way that love without respect, trust, and honesty is nothing more than an illusion. And Sarah, for all her charm and the life we built together, had shown me that love could break you. It could tear you apart if you weren't careful. It was the kind of love I needed to leave behind, the kind that demanded more than I could give without losing myself. But Emily? She was different. She made me believe in love again, not as some grand, perfect fairy tale, but as something simple and real. Something that didn't demand perfection, just honesty, effort, and understanding. I wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But we didn't need to be. We were two people, each with our own baggage, each with our own stories, but together, we were something more. It was a sunny afternoon when I realized I was ready for the next step. Emily and I were walking through the park, hand in hand, just enjoying the quiet beauty of the day. Our conversations had become so effortless, so easy. There were still moments of awkwardness or hesitation, but we were building something steady and strong. I looked over at her, watching the way the sunlight caught her hair, the way she smiled when she saw something that amused her. And in that moment, I knew I was ready to take the leap. Emily, I started, my voice a little shaky but filled with conviction. I don't want to go through life wondering what could have been. I'm not afraid anymore. She looked at me, her eyebrows furrowed with curiosity. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, gathering the courage I'd been building over the past months. I mean, I want to be with you. Not just today, not just for now, but for the long haul. I'm ready. I've been ready for a while, but I think I needed to say it out loud. I love you, Emily, and I'm not going to let my past hold me back from that anymore. There was a long pause, just long enough for me to start second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd said the wrong thing. But then she smiled, slowly at first, as if processing everything I'd just said. And then her smile grew wider, her eyes shining with something that made my heart skip a beat. I love you too, she said softly. I've been waiting for you to say that. And in that moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't afraid anymore. The past, the betrayal, the scars, none of it had the power to keep me from moving forward. I had learned to trust again, to love again, and most importantly, to love myself again. I didn't know where life would take us from here. But I knew this. I had found something real with Emily, something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something that didn't exist. I wasn't trying to fix the broken pieces of my past. I was building something new, and that was enough. The journey hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't over. There would be bumps along the way, moments of doubt, moments of fear. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had Emily, and that was all I needed. As we walked through the park, the sun setting behind us, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The pain from the past wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. I had let go of the things that didn't serve me, and I had made room for something better. This was my new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace it. I learned a lot from the last few years. I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the pain didn't happen. Healing means accepting the past for what it was and making a choice to move forward anyway. I learned that love isn't about perfection or promises of forever. It's about being present, about working together to build something strong, even when the road ahead is uncertain. If you're going through something like this, if you're in the midst of betrayal, heartbreak, or uncertainty, my advice is this: take your time. It's okay to heal slowly. It's okay to not have everything figured out right away. Just make sure you're taking steps forward, no matter how small. And when you're ready, let go of the past. It doesn't define you. You do. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. I hope my story resonates with anyone who has gone through a similar experience. You're not alone, and there is always hope, even when it feels like the light is too far away to reach.